everyone, I hope you're doing okay. It is Lucille and today I'm bringing you my February reading journal update. It's a bit late like the previous update because as last time I got sick again as I was preparing myself to record the voiceover, so it hasn't escaped me that I've been sick every month since the year started and I'm not really happy about it. The first book I'm doing in this video is for a book I finished at the end of January. Rogue Protocol is the third volume in the Murderbot series. I've talked about volume 1 and 2 in previous videos and you might have already heard about it. The Murderbot series is mainly composed of novellas, even if now I think some of the later volumes might be novels. It's a science fiction series following an android that calls itself Murderbot. They have hacked their control module and so they can think for themselves and they can act for themselves, and they have escaped the control of the company that created them. In Rogue Protocol, they're once more embroiled in protecting some people and there's a conspiracy and there's some action, and I can't say much more because I don't want to spoil you the whole series, and as with the other volumes, I really enjoyed it. The plot, however, really resembled the plot from volume 1 and 2, where you have a big company entity that's doing stuff they shouldn't be doing and they're killing people to try to cover it up, and it's just getting a bit repetitive, but I just really like the style that Martha Wells uses for Murderbot. They are very cynical and ironic, but sometimes it gets to be a bit too much because every 2 sentences we have some inner thoughts between parentheses that are like, oh, I'm so depressed, I'm so witty, I'm so cynical, that it gets to be a bit too much. But all in all, it's just such a nice reading experience. The second book I got with holds due to Libby, and because they're novellas, they usually have a much quicker turnaround than longer novels, which is nice. And I also have a hold on a collection of short stories in the series. For my spread, I was a bit at a loss at first because I had not really known what to do for the previous 2 spreads for volume 1 and 2. When I think about the Murderbot series, it's so science fiction, it's so black and space and chrome and steel and whatever, that I don't have any stationery that goes with it. But as I was thinking about that spread, I thought, well, if I'm thinking about the unfathomable depths of space and stars, why don't I try to find some picture of a night sky with stars and use it as I would a washi tape? And I think I found it on Canva. I changed a bit the setting of the image to make it a bit less black, a bit more blue and not so dark. And I really like how I used it as a background for my title and for the cover. I had to glue the cover on some white piece of paper to make a border around it to make it stand out against the night sky, because this cover had already been cut down from when I read the second volume back in August or July, I think. So I already had the cover printed and I was really happy to be finally using it. I also decided to print some illustrations that had been made about the series, and I will link the artist down below because it went really well with my night sky, and I decided to use a grey Crayola Super Tip to do the title. I imitated the font of the title on the cover to make it, and it's not my favorite thing in the world to letter stuff and to have to cut around them so precisely, but I think it works well on that spread. And if I had had more stationery that would go with a space science fiction theme, I think I would have used some on the spread, but I didn't have any, so that's how the spread is. I added 2 quotes from the book in my black gel pen. The next two spreads I'm doing are going to be one-page spread. The first book I'm going to talk to you about is Bride by Ailey Hazelwood. And I didn't think I was going to read that book, but I've been religiously watching reading journal videos for a year now, and Ailey Hazelwood and Bride have been talked about a lot, and I was getting curious. As I was getting curious about another book I will talk to you in a minute. But I didn't want to read it because I don't read romances anymore. A few years back, I used to read quite a few of them because I found them fun. I found that the romances were sweet even if they were not believable, and I was just having fun reading the over-the-top descriptions and the big declarations of love. But it's not so fun anymore. It's just depressing me quite a bit, so I don't read them. And they're a bit annoying, to be fair. So I didn't want to read Bride, even if I was getting a bit curious. But it was the first book chosen for the book club book at the library, and I was curious. At that point, when I was doing the spread, I wasn't sure I would go to the book club meeting, because kind of thing where you go and meet new people and you talk about your opinion, that requires a lot of spoons, and I wasn't sure I would get them. But I did, and I really enjoyed it. So let me talk about the spread before I talk about the novel. For the spread, I imagined something in red and white, and I thought that this sticker would be perfect for it, but the tulip did not really scream the atmosphere of the book for me. So when I put it on the page, I wasn't happy about it, but don't fear, it's not wasted. I removed it and I put it on a plastic envelope so I can reuse it later. And as you would have seen before, I had started by drawing my frame in different colors. And that's a bit of the theme of this video, me drawing a frame in one color and thinking it's not good, using a second color to cover it up and thinking it's not good either, and then using a third color to cover it. So the line is a bit more thick than I would like, but that's okay. I decided to use those flower sticker from Journal Say, and if I had had those same stickers also in red, I would have mixed them up, but I didn't. So the page ends up looking not exactly as I would have wished, but I still think it's fine. I really enjoyed those one-page spreads because when I had to do the spread for Bride and for the next book on the right, I wasn't really enthusiastic about it, but when I thought I might as well do a one-page spread, it lifted a weight off my shoulders and I was able to do it. So what is Bride about? It's a romance with a bit of a fantasy twist. We follow Mystery, who is a vampire, who is in an arranged marriage with a werewolf called something. You can see how much I was invested in their romance. And so she is forced, basically, or she goes into this arranged marriage for some reason that we won't discover at first. And so she moves to the werewolf territory and she has to navigate werewolf and vampire politics. And we finally discover why she accepted this arranged marriage, and I'm not going to tell you because it was an interesting plot point for me. But I was surprised when I started reading it that there was a plot, and I wasn't expecting it to have a plot in my snotty way. I was happily surprised because the romance didn't start at first, even if the trope started immediately. You could see that the guy was already in love with her at first sight for some werewolf first sight mate reason, and that she was misunderstanding every sign that was saying that he loves you, you know? And when you've watched a romance film once, you know the signs, so it was a bit silly that Mystery wouldn't understand the signs, but I know that when you're in the story, it's a bit different than when you read one. But the signs were so clear that he was in love with her and that she did love him that, yeah, I was rolling my eyes a bit. I enjoyed Mystery styles, I enjoyed the plot. Obviously, when she starts getting attracted to the big bad werewolf that has a soft side, that has amazing smell and eyes and muscles, it's just annoying to me, but that's a me problem. The only thing I was a bit uncomfortable with was that when they start being very intimate and it gets very graphic, and some things were so graphic, so like, why do you need to tell us all those things? We don't need to know those things. And I'm going to say the same when I talk about another book in a bit, because I read Fourth Wing and it gets even more graphic than this book. And when we were discussing the book at the book club meeting, we were all like, why did it get so graphic, and we were a bit uncomfortable. And yeah, I think it's okay to have an intimate life that you don't share with the readers. It just seems that the book becomes something else when you're so graphic about it. I wasn't too enthralled by the end of the book. I enjoyed the first twist, but then it got all so twisty that I was like, I don't find it fair when you just have twists and turns that you can't have expected, that just drop from the sky, and you're like, okay, that's a surprise, but I'm not invested in it. I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't investigating it. So apparently that's one of the things, to have all those twists and turns, but yeah, that didn't really impress me. I've discovered that there's gonna be a second volume, and I would be curious about it, and we've discussed about having it as a book club book when it's published. All in all, it was a fun read. I was happily surprised about it, and I'm glad I read it, because now I know that I can be snotty, but some things are not as bad as I fear they will be. The next book I'm doing a spread on is called Sweep of the Heart by Ilona Andrews, and Ilona Andrews is a duo of writer, husband and wife. Sweep of the Heart is the 5th volume in the Innkeeper Chronicles, and I haven't talked to you about the other volumes in previous videos because I read them in 2021 or 2022. But at the end of the video, when I do my flip through, I will talk to you about 2 more books, because I did those spreads off camera. I did the spread for Fourth Wing and for the rereading of the first 4 volumes and novella of the Innkeeper Chronicles. The Innkeeper Chronicles for Dina. She is an innkeeper on Earth, and that means that she is in a symbiotic relationship with an inn that's alive, and she gives sanctuary to all matters of beings from the whole of the universe and all the universes that exist outside. She gives sanctuary to vampire lords, to aliens shaped like chickens, and there's a plot about her parents' disappearance and about her having to host all these different beings under her one roof, and how she can shape in to receive them, and what her powers are, and the different plots that evolves from her guests being in the inn. And it's a series I really enjoy, because the concept of inns and of innkeepers is really interesting to me. I think it's really fun, despite some caveats. I was excited to be able to read Sweep of the Heart, and that was the first volume I was able to borrow from Libby, and I'm so excited I was finally able to do that. Libby is a website you have access to with a library card. I know Libby exists in the US, in Australia, and in Canada. So I used my library card to have access to this online library of audiobooks and ebooks. I hadn't been able to borrow any of the ebooks before because my e-reader was formatted for a French Kobo account, and when you have a French Kobo account, you can't get books from Libby for some reason. So I discovered that I had to create a Canadian Kobo account. Finally it worked, and having Libby on your e-reader is such a luxury. Your holds, so you can borrow books, or you can put holds on them if they're already borrowed, because as with physical books you have a certain number of copies in use and people have to take turns to read them. And on your e-reader you can get your holds directly from Libby when they're ready. You can go on Libby from your e-reader and look for a book and borrow it or place a hold, and it's such magic. It's like so convenient, and I just love it. Of course, I wish I would have access to French books on Libby, but there's not a lot. Anyway, I got Sweep of the Heart quite quickly, even if I thought I started as like being 6th or 7th in line. And when I got it, I wasn't sure I was going to read it because I had read the series so long ago and I wasn't sure I was in the mood, but I got the book from Libby. There were people behind me waiting for the book. So I thought, okay, I have the book, I might as well read it, and I enjoyed it. I'm not talking about the specific plot for Sweep of the Heart because if you haven't read the previous 4 volumes, that would be a bit weird. And it made me want to reread the first 4 volumes and the novella. So I think that's a win. For the spread, I had the same problem as with the previous one. I had to redo the frame several times. I used a tree sticker from Journal Say because I thought it looked science fiction-y enough because I think there's a tree with lights in one of the volumes. I also used one of the artworks that was done specifically for the series, and I will link down the artist. And that's all of the decoration I did on this one-page spread. I had thought about adding a bit more bits of those trees with fairy lights in, but the spread was small enough and I had enough to say, and the quote I added took more space than I thought it would, so I didn't want to add more, and the frame was colorful already, so that's all I did, and all in all I'm happy about it. So this was the last spread of the video, and that wasn't too many spreads around this time, but that's how it is. I did 2 more spreads for February, but I did them off camera, and I will talk to you about the books and the spreads in the flip through at the end of the video. What I had to do after the spreads was to update the cover page for February, and if you watched my January update, you would have seen that I decided to have 1 page for 2 months because usually I don't have as many books. That would mean that I would need 2 pages, and I just like having 1 page for 2 months. I use a scrap bit of white paper to write février, February in French, to be in the same style as the January cover page. And I had a problem because in February I read many more books that I was expecting. I had Bright, I had Sweep of the Heart, and I had the 4-5 rereads I had. So if I wanted to have all the covers as well as a little insert with information as I had it in January, I didn't have space for it. And I really did want that little insert on which in January I wrote how many books were from the library, the format, how many books were favorites. So I thought I just won't include the rereads on the page. But then I didn't want to not include them, so I reprinted them very small and I added them on the right. I have another book that I didn't talk to you about, The Days of Augusta. It is a memoir of a native woman that was born in the 19th century in Canada, in BC, and she lived until the mid-20th century. And this book is composed of her answers to interviews, some of her poems and stories, and I borrowed it from the library because I had read an article about it in a newspaper, and it was interesting, but I didn't have a lot to say about it, so I didn't do any spreads about it. I added my little information in a bit of scrap paper. I wrote that there were 5 books I reread. 3 books were borrowed from the library, 1 was borrowed from Libby, and 1 book was for the library book club. Now, the 2 things I'm going to do at the end of this video is going to update my book bingo and do a spread on the right for something different. If you watched the previous video, you saw that I set up this book bingo and I had already colored in 4 squares. This time around, I was able to color in the square that says rereading a book, and I'm also going to color in another square that's reading a book that's more than 400 pages, and this one goes for Fourth Wing. I used a Tombow marker to do it in this green color, and I have to do several layers of it so it doesn't get streaky. And at first when you use it you're like, oh, it's gonna be ugly, but as you can see for the rereading a book square, after a bit it gets more uniform. It's less bad as it looks like right now for the more than 400 pages square. What I put at the end of my reading journal in the annex is like reading challenges, lists and stuff I don't necessarily want in the main part of the journal where I have my spreads. And one thing I had wanted to do when I was watching reading journal videos at the beginning of last year was doing a spread about first sentences of books I was reading, and I thought it was fun to see all these first sentences together, and I just decided I was going to do it that day. I didn't want to have too much on the page because I wanted to have space for the sentences, and I only set up 1 page because I wanted to see how much space the sentences from the books I read since the beginning of the year would take, and if I enjoyed doing it and if I wanted to do more pages, I could just do that after this page. And spoiler alert, I almost finished that page in this video because some first sentences are super long. I'm not sure if some people don't write the full first sentence if it's like a paragraph long, but it would seem weird to me to not do it, and I find it especially interesting to see that some first sentences are like 4 words and some others are like a paragraph, and I like seeing them together. But obviously, because some of them are super long, even with I think I have 15-20 books since the beginning of the year. I took quite a bit of space, so I'm gonna need to set up another spread for first sentences. The stickers I decided to use for that spread are from Journalsay. There's these blue flowers and these quills and manuscripts and ink stickers. I wanted to use different color inks for the first sentences, but I didn't want it to get too much, so I chose to use black, grey, and then different thickness of pens. So the sentences still look different between themselves, but they're still in harmony, if I can say that. And I'm gonna let you enjoy the rest of me setting up that page. And the next clip is going to be the flip through, where I will talk to you about the 2 spreads I did off camera. As promised, I'm going to do a flip through, and I'm also going to talk to you about the 2 books, or rather the 2 spreads I did off camera, because one of the spreads is for more than one book. So we started February here. I wish I had had more space to do it, but that's how it is. And the first spread I showed in this video was this one for Rogue Protocol, and I'm still really happy about it. The next 2 ones are for Pride and Sweep of the Heart, volume 5. So now I can show you the spreads I did for volume 1 to 4, and I just love it. I don't think I would have been able to do that spread if I had filmed myself, and I'm still very puzzled as to why filming myself while journaling can be so stressful sometimes. Because my setup is super simple. I have a tripod that clips on the side of my desk. I'm filming with my phone. I don't speak on camera, so I can just focus on what I'm doing. But even if it's very minimal, I still can't quite journal the way I would do on my own. I still have to check that I'm still in focus, that the phone is still recording. I can't journal too much next to my body. I have to make sure stuff are in frame, and even if I know I can cut anything, I still feel a bit self-conscious when I'm doing something, and I don't take as much time as I should sometimes to figure out a layout, and this layout took me a while to figure out. I was looking for artwork that would be related to the Innkeeper Chronicles, but I couldn't find anything that wasn't AI generated, and it was just so sad, you see, and so I decided to just look for real pictures of stuff that would maybe resemble the ambience of the inn, but the inn is something out of a science fiction novel, so obviously I couldn't show the huge halls and the never-ending sea from another planet, but I decided to use that picture of Victorian house, that porch picture and this bedroom run, because they went well together. There's a lot of talk about Diana drinking tea on the porch, and I thought that house was beautiful, and I'm very proud about the title. I used dot grid paper to letter it simply, and I just love how it turned out. I used a Crayola Super Tip to write, and I also wanted to incorporate some vintage book pages. And at first I thought that the title would be like on the left or something, but I found that it went so well with the pictures, so I created this little collage, this little cluster. I added some leaf stickers from Journal Say, and I did a simple frame around the page in black. I added 2 quotes to the spread to make it a bit more dynamic. I still enjoy the atmosphere of the inn so much. I love the science fiction aspect. It's very much like Star Wars themed when you go to the different planets and meet different alien races, and I was particularly curious about reading volume 4, because volume 4 follows Diana's sister as she goes to another planet for some family matters, and I was really curious to see how it was set up. And even if some things are a bit annoying, especially when we discovered Sean in volume 1, he's one of the main characters in the series. And in volume 1, he was such a creep. He was totally alpha male, being predatory, stalking her and thinking that a winning smile is going to forgive everything. And the worst was that Dina, and I've been calling her Diana before, but it's Dina. And the worst is that Diana just falls for him when he's being such a creep and he's not listening to her. And I was like, he's supposed to be the swoon-worthy guy we have in volume 5. I don't remember how it evolves. And in volume 2, some stuff happened to him, and then when he comes back, he's not such a dick. He's not that overconfident. He's much more brooding and silent. And I was glad of it because he was such a pain in the first volume. I really didn't like that. I also try not to pay too much attention to the romance because obviously all the men are so handsome and their eyes are wonderful and they smell and they're like, I don't know about you, but when I meet my crush, I'm not always sniffing them and looking into their eyes because they look like melted butter or onyx or whatever. So yeah. Apart from that, I was disappointed when I finished reading the 4 novels plus the novella because I wanted to read more. So I would be glad to read another volume in this series. The second spread I did off camera was for Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And if you had told me at the beginning of the year that I would read it and I would read the second volume and be excited about it, I wouldn't have believed you, because everything I had heard about it in reading journal videos did not make me want to read it, because it seemed like a young adult novel with a lot of romance and a lot of badass moments, and I wasn't interested in it. But then people were talking so much about it that I was like, maybe there's something I'm missing. I'm getting curious. And the book was suggested for one of our picks of the book club, and I was like, okay, that's the reason I needed to finally take the plunge. And I started reading it, and I almost stopped reading the book at page 2 because it felt like when I was reading the beginning of the novel, Violet describes herself in a way that was like, I'm so thin and my joints are painful and I get hurt so much, but I'm so clever. It felt like listening to a short video that's a satire of young adult novel and Mary Sue characters, and I was like, that can't be the style, that can't be the way whole novel is written. I can't do it. So I stopped reading, but I was like, okay, that won't do to just read 2 pages. So let's try to go a bit farther. And it took me a while to get interested in the novel. Reading the novel was like reading a young adult novel when the genre started back like 10 years ago. It reminded me of reading Divergent, and I enjoyed Divergent. Everyone is badass, everyone is wearing leather and being weird, having colored their hair and being so powerful, and it's fun in this way, but also you can't really take it too seriously. And obviously, like in the Innkeeper Chronicle, as soon as Violet meets her love interest, the shadowy Xaden, she can't stop thinking about his abs and his smile and his pecs and his smell and his dangerous air. And what I found funny and what indeed hurt to me a little bit was that she knew it was bad to be so fixated on him, and she had no good reason to be fixated on him because he was dangerous and she was attracted to that for some reason. So that was funny to see her saying, yeah, I know it's a bad idea, but I can't help it. I had to skim a little when she was going on and on about how annoying he is, but how hot he is, and obviously it's not a surprise they end up together. And then the very, very, very explicit scene started, and I was like, that's the most explicit scenes I've read in a young adult novel yet. I didn't mind those scenes, but they were so explicit, they were so long and detailed and graphic. All in all, I enjoyed the novel. I liked the dragon lore, I liked the plot, it was interesting. I would read for several hours on my couch, and I would be thinking about the novel when I wasn't reading it, and I was very annoyed when I noticed that volume 2 and 3 were borrowed from the library as I was reading volume 1, because I just wanted to have them ready in case I wanted to read them next. For the spread, I did something similar to this one, with a simple black frame. I also wanted to use some pictures inspired by the universe, and there were more fan arts that are not AI generated, which was nice. But I didn't want to have a fan art of Violet and Xaden kissing, so I chose this picture of the Basgiath War College. I also wanted some dragon imagery, but I didn't want a big dragon picture, so I took those black dragon silhouettes from Canva, and the designers of the cover used the same stock pictures I did. I didn't even notice that before I went over my spreads after that. I printed those black outline, and I don't have a cutting machine, so I had to fussy cut around them. I also used a black fine liner to go over the images because it hadn't printed as black as I wished it would have. I did the title on the same dot graded paper with a Crayola super tip. I wanted it in the orange tones to go with the cover. At first I thought I would do something similar like the previous spread and I have the title here in a cluster, but I felt that the title was so big that having it written down next to it was a bit silly. And I added this Scribble washi tape that I love, that's from Journal Say, and I put it under the title, and I think I like it. I think something's missing for it to totally work, but I'm still happy about it. And here it is. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. The next video might not be a reading journal update as I read only 2 books in March. So I will have the March and April updates in one video. So maybe I will do a tour of my previous journal, my finished reading journal, because I really like tours of reading journals. So that might be the next video, but I'll let you know. And as usual, tell me in the comments if you've read any of the books I've mentioned, what you thought about them, and if you know of any of the books I would enjoy because I enjoyed or did not enjoy those books. And I'll see you next time. Bye!